This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, and Team Valor. We begin shortly after Ash's victory over Brandon, as everyone gathers outside the battle pyramid to congratulate Ash. With a smile, Scott presents the young man with a framed case containing all its Frontier symbols, while formally inducting him into the Battle Frontier Hall of Fame. However, this is not the only thing Scott has for Ash, as he adds that he would like to extend an invitation for the boy to become the newest Frontier Brain, a privilege only extended to those who have completed the Battle Frontier Challenge. This gives Ash pause, as on one hand, to become a Frontier Brain would mean to end his journey, but on the other, he would get to battle lots of strong trainers, all of whom had been handpicked by Scott to give his Frontier Brains a run for their money. Figuring that if he ever wants to travel again, he can step down or go on break, Ash ultimately decides to accept the offer, making Scott beam, as he grins that he knew Ash would make the right call. He then tells the young man to come with him, since they'll need to get some stuff sorted out at Battle Frontier HQ back in Celadon, and they don't have a moment to lose. For a second, Ash looks back at his friends, as if about to tell them to come on, but then he remembers that May and Max are both shipping off to Johto in a few days, and Brock, while a loyal companion, has his own dreams, which won't be achieved by following him to Battle Frontier HQ, meaning that for now, this is goodbye. Walking over to the Petalburg siblings, Ash flashes them each a grin, telling May to win the Johto Grand Festival, and Max to come challenge his battle facility when he's become a trainer in his own right, with the pair both promising to do exactly that, as they each give the brain to be a high five. Next, Ash approaches Brock, though here he finds himself at a loss for words. Sure, he and Brock split up briefly during their time in the Orange Islands and again after their Johto journey, though something about this feels far more final. Seeing that the boy is struggling to speak, Brock decides to do the heavy lifting, extending a hand and telling Ash that he knows he'll make a great Frontier Brain. Reaching out to clasp the hand, Ash replies that he also knows Brock will make an amazing breeder, with the young men each meeting each other's eyes and sharing a smile that says even though their paths may diverge, they will always be friends. With his goodbyes now out of the way, Ash at last returns to Scott, joining him, Professor Oak, and Nurse Joy as they drive away in the red convertible, while beside him, Officer Jenny and Squirtle depart one way, and Charizard soars overhead. Unfortunately for Scott's passengers, his claim about not having a moment to lose is meant rather literally, with the sunglasses-clad man employing his usual reckless driving style to get them back to the Pokemon Center and Oak's lab at top speed. When the others are gone, Scott then begins to speak with Ash, explaining that as a new Frontier Brain, he has several important decisions he has to make, such as the design of his symbol, the location of his battle facility, and the rules he wants to put in place to test his challenges. So it might be worth giving that some thought during the drive, since once the boilerplate is out of the way, he'll be right on to work. Taking this to heart, Ash remains rather quiet over the next few days as he and Scott travel to Celadon City, with the only thing capable of stirring him from his reverie being their arrival at Battle Frontier HQ. Like most buildings in Celadon, the headquarters of the Battle Frontier is a skyscraper, with Ash and Scott riding the elevator all the way to the top floor before stepping out into Scott's office. Letting out a relaxed sigh, Scott admits that while he prefers to wander, he can't deny that he loves the view up here, bidding Ash to take a seat. When the two of them are seated on opposite sides of a decadent mahogany desk, Scott presses a button, causing the large window showcasing Celadon City to transform into a TV screen, with it transmitting 7 evenly sized boxes, which one by one begin to fill with the faces of the 7 Frontier Brains: Noland, Greta, Tucker, Lucy, Spencer, Annabelle, and Brandon. With the exception of the Pyramid King, who already knows what Scott is about to tell them, the Brains ask what their boss is calling them for, with Scott in turn explaining that Ash has agreed to join their ranks. This puts a smile on everyone's face, with each of them congratulating Ash on his victory and welcoming him to the club, with Annabelle seeming particularly pleased, as she comments that though she's not a clairvoyant, she had a feeling Ash would be joining them. Grinning broadly, Scott thanks his employees for greeting Ash so warmly, saying that he hopes he can count on each of them to help Ash out if he needs any guidance in his new duties as a Frontier Brain. Nodding, the group of 7 all promise to do so, though before the meeting can be brought to a close, Spencer states that he has an announcement to make. Now that they have a new brain to keep up their numbers, he intends to retire, since with youngsters like Greta, Annabelle, and Ash coming up, he believes it's time for old buffers such as himself to step aside. Good-naturedly, Nolan says that Spencer's still got plenty of good battling years left in him, though with a grin, the old sage suggests that he might also consider retiring, a claim which earns a shocked exclamation from the factory head as he protests that he's not that old. Laughing heartily, Scott tells the Brains he's going to wrap this up before anyone's feelings get hurt. Then with a wave, he disengages the monitor, leaving just himself and Ash in the office. With the matter of informing the other Frontier Brains of Ash's decision out of the way, Scott now turns back to the boy, asking if he's decided any of the questions he posed him on the way, to which the raven-haired youth replies that he has, and more than that, he's ready to get underway. The first and most pressing matter is that of location, with Ash explaining that he wants his facility to be as close to Pallet Town as possible so he can visit his mum and his friends, with Scott calling this a great idea. Thanks to his vast network of contacts, the Frontier boss is quickly able to secure a parcel of land a few hours walk from Ash's hometown, with construction beginning immediately. facility. Naturally, Ash is deeply involved in the design of his new battle facility, naming it the Battle Junction, as the thing which most excites him about becoming a frontier brain is the chance to meet and battle new people, making this a fitting name. As a result, the next few months are split between overseeing the construction of the Battle Junction and training at Oak's lab with his Pokemon, as he'll need all their help for this next leg of his journey. This even involves bringing Charizard, Pidgeot, and Primeape back permanently, with Pikachu and Bulbasaur being delighted to see their old travelling companions again. The other big task that takes up Ash's time is the creation of his symbol. Wanting to make this something special, he spends many hours contemplating this, even getting help from Tracy as someone who has an eye for aesthetics. However, it is actually his mum Delia who helps him the most, as one evening after a fruitless day of designing, she suggests he think about the things that really mean something to him. Smiling, Ash replies that's easy: his friends, his Pokemon, and his adventures, with Delia saying that this is his answer. He just needs to find a way to represent that in an image. Casting his eyes around in confusion, Ash soon spots Pikachu seated beside him wearing his cap, and as an idea fills his head, he begins to grin that this is perfect. The following morning, Ash calls Scott, showing him the design he has settled on, with it being modelled on the hat he wore during so many adventures. Smiling that it's bold, but simple, Scott is happy to accept this design, naming it the adaptability symbol in honour of its creator. Finally, after what seems like both an eternity and no time at all, the Battle Junction is finished, with Scott inviting Ash and all his friends to have a joint tour and party the night before it is set to open. Due to the significance of this event in Ash's life, all his friends and family attend, with the guest list being Ash, Scott, Delia, Professor Oak, Brock, Misty, Tracy, May, Max, and the Frontier Brains. The only one who can't make it is Gary, though he sends his regards, promising that once he gets back from his research fellowship in Sinnoh, he'll be sure to give the facility a visit. Naturally, it is a night of high spirits, with everyone toasting Ash as he leads them through the Battle Junction. Due to Ash not being a super complicated guy, his facility is similarly straightforward, with it just being a large glass dome resembling a greenhouse, with a central battle room as well as a small back room housing a healing machine. The only features of the facility that prove out of the ordinary can be found on the battlefield, which Ash demonstrates can be changed either manually or randomly to one of several different terrains, with the young Frontier Brain explaining that the theme of his facility is adaptability, so having to adapt to the battlefield is one of the ways he plans to challenge his challenges. The other oddity is a structure resembling a high-tech bird bath located beside Ash's trainer box, and as they approach it, Scott explains that it is a miniature Pokeball transfer machine, with Ash simply needing to select which of his Pokemon he wants, and it will be sent right to him from Oak's lab. Grinning, Ash adds this will be particularly important considering the main rule of the Battle Junction, that each round, the challenger must battle at a type disadvantage. Frowning a little, Misty asks if that isn't a bit unfair, though Scott replies that actually it's brilliant, since by implementing this rule, challengers will be forced to adapt and overcome disadvantages, something Ash himself has proved is doable time and time again through his unorthodox battling style. Nodding, Ash's friends all agree that it's just like him to make boneheaded stubbornness in the face of bad odds a central feature of his facility, a claim which makes the boy sweat drop as he sighs they didn't have to put it so bluntly. However, here Brock changes the subject, having a question of his own. Without hesitation, Scott tells the pewter gym leader to lay it on him, with Brock asking what happens if a challenger uses a Pokemon Ash doesn't own anything strong against. Grinning, the Frontier boss calls this a good question, the one they've already thought of a solution to, with him having left a series of powerful Pokemon in the care of Professor Oak for Ash to use if it ever happens. Though, since being a Frontier Brain isn't a full-time gig, Ash will have plenty of chances to fill up his own roster with new Pokemon, so that before long, he won't need the rentals anymore. Finally, the tour comes to an end, with Ash thanking everyone for coming, though before the group can dissipate, Scott informs Ash that he must pass one more test before he can officially take his place as a Frontier Brain. He must battle Scott himself. Grinning, Ash replies that he's got no complaints about that, and so returning to the battlefield, he begins firing up the machines for the first match of the Battle Junction. To ensure the type disadvantage rule is maintained, Ash explains that their battle will actually be 3 one-on-one battles, with the winner being determined in a best-out-of-3 format, meaning there will be no substitutions, and Scott as the challenger will be required to choose first every time. Smiling broadly, Scott calls this firm but fair, as he reveals his first Pokemon to be none other than Tyranitar. At once, the machine beside Ash begins scanning the Green Goliath, with it quickly projecting holograms of all of his Pokemon who fit the criteria. After a moment of consideration, Ash taps one of the holograms, and at once the selection screen fades, instead being replaced by a crackle and a flash as a Pokeball appears in the dish on top of the device. Grabbing hold of the ball, Ash lobs it into the air, showing his first Pokemon to be Heracross, with a Battle Beetle bursting onto the field. Speaking of the field, the Battle Junction's randomizer has selected a rock battlefield for the first stage of this match, and while this is more favourable to Tyranitar than Heracross, Ash isn't worried. Since he chose first, Scott is also given the first move, with him ordering Tyranitar to use Fire Fang, hoping to capitalise on his super effective move, as he's well aware that his Pokemon is weak to Heracross's bug moves, and quad weak to its fighting moves. However, being quick on its feet, or rather wings, Heracross is able to flit back, avoiding the hit, then coming in for a fierce Mega Horn right to Tyranitar's gut. Letting out a pained roar, However, the Titanic Tyrant swipes at Heracross with its tail, striking it and sending it crashing onto its back with its own chitter of pain. Pressing this advantage, Scott next has Tyranitar use Stomp, with the armor Pokemon driving a plated foot into Heracross. Though here Ash meets the attack head-on, having used Tyranitar's approach to charge up a Focus Punch. Being quite effective, this vastly outclasses the Stomp in terms of power, with Tyranitar not only being knocked back, but also put off balance so that it staggers backwards and lands on its backside with a heavy thump. This is just the opening Ash and Heracross need, and as Tyranitar attempts to lumber back to its feet, the bug is faster, taking to the air and driving one last Mega Horn right into the green Goliath's face. This proves too much for Tyranitar, and as it slumps forward, a large scoreboard on the wall declares Ash the winner of the first round, putting the score at 0-1. In keeping with the rules, both trainers then recall their Pokemon, and as the battle computer randomly assigns them a new field, Scott unveils his second Pokemon, going with Dragonite. As Ash only has one Pokemon that fits the bill this time, the selection screen does not appear, instead simply teleporting in the Pokemon's ball. Grabbing hold of it, Ash grins that it's been a while since they've battled together, then with a cry of its name, he brings Glalie out onto the field, which in this case is a simple regulation battlefield, like one would find in a gym or at the Pokemon League. Grinning as well, Scott praises that Ash is really thinking like a frontier brain with these choices, though he's afraid that if Ash thinks type advantage will make this an easy win, he's in for a rude awakening. To prove this point, Scott opens with a Fire Blast, with Ash barely having time to call for a double team, as the Flaming Kanju shoots towards his Ice-type friend. This trick does manage to save Glalie, with the Fire Blast passing harmlessly through one of the duplicates. Though still smiling, Scott lightly chides that he thought Ash would know him well enough by now to realize smoke and mirrors aren't going to stop him. He then cocks his head slightly as if listening very close to something, while softly wagging a finger back and forth like a metronome. After a moment of this, he declares that he's got it. Then, as he raises the finger, he points at the centermost Glalie clone and tells Dragonite to fire on his mark. Loyally, the Dragon type waits. Then on its trainer's command, it lets loose a full power Fire Blast which strikes the real Glalie head on, just as Scott knew it would. Letting out a shriek and spinning in midair, Glalie comes to a stop in front of Ash, who asks if it's alright, with the face Pokemon nodding once more, then turning its piercing blue eyes back to Dragonite. Like last time, Scott has chosen to use his opponent's moment of vulnerability to his advantage, closing the distance and attempting to strike with Steel Wing. However, unlike last time, this attack is successful, with Glalie being sent high into the air, where it cries out in terror as Dragonite follows it upwards. Desperately, Ash tells his frosty friend to use Ice Beam, though as Glalie fires blue bolts of energy down at Dragonite, Scott has his Dragon counter with Hyper Beam. In such a clash, it is no contest, with the orange stream completely disintegrating the icy blasts, so that when the harsh light of the attack fades, it is revealed Glalie falling to earth, where it lands with a hard thunk, spirals in its eyes. Up on the scoreboard, Scott receives his first point, tying the match and requiring the pair of battlers to go into a third and final round. As the duo recall their Pokemon, Scott poses Ash a question, asking if he's ever stopped to consider why guys like Nolan and Brandon, who both use legendaries, work for him. Looking a little puzzled, Ash admits that now that Scott mentions it, it is odd they would work for anyone, with the Frontier boss noting that while it would certainly seem that way, Ash will understand why once he's seen his last Pokemon. He then pulls out a very battered looking Ultra Ball, from which he brings forth his final Pokemon, and as he does, Rainbow Light fills the battle junction, causing the assembled spectators and even Ash himself to gasp as they behold the majesty of Ho-Oh up close. Looking the Rainbow Pokemon in the eye, Ash breathes that he knows this Ho-Oh, saying that he and Pikachu saw her on the first day of their journey so long ago, and then again on the day of their first match with Brandon. Nodding, Scott agrees, saying that most of the time he lets his buddy roam free, but he brought it here tonight because he wants to test Ash against the best of the best, and that means Ho-Oh. Beaming broadly, Ash says in that case, he knows exactly who he's going to use, and ignoring his transfer machine, he instead looks to Pikachu, asking if he's up for a battle. Flashing his cheeks, the electric rodent eagerly agrees, then as a water field rises into place, he leaps off of Ash's shoulder and onto one of the floating platforms. As usual, Scott moves first, telling Ho to use Flamethrower, though as the Rainbow Bird rains its celestial blaze down on Pikachu, the little electric rodent dodges, leaping from platform to platform and closing in on his prey. When he is close enough, he fires off a Thunderbolt of his own, though just like him, Ho-Oh dodges, making this opening salvo something of a bust for both sides. Seeing that ranged attacks won't work, the Frontier boss next calls for a Brave Bird, with Ho-Oh briefly becoming a phoenix wreathed in flames before they cool into a cloak of bright blue energy. The now blue bird then directs itself right at Pikachu, who once more goes for a Thunderbolt, and while this is enough to irritate Ho-Oh, it is not enough to stop it, with the living legend soon stretching out a wing and driving into Pikachu's chest. Truthfully, with the size difference between the Pokemon, this lariat actually strikes Pikachu's entire front, sending him skipping across the pool like a stone, own, before crashing back hard into the wall. Worriedly, Ash asks if his buddy is alright, to which the electric rodent gives a resolute nod before leaping back into the pool and restarting the battle. Smiling easily, Scott comments that Pikachu really does have guts, though he's known that since his match with Agatha the day they first met. Grinning too, Ash nods that he remembers, then with a look of determination similar to his partner, calls for a third Thunderbolt. Letting out a mighty cry, the mouse does as he's told, shooting electricity up at Ho-Oh, though this time, Scott does not mess around, skipping Flamethrower entirely and ordering his old friend to use Sacred Flame. At once, the fires of heaven rain down on Pikachu, and knowing there's no way they can counter it, Ash tells his starter to dive deep into the water, with the electric rodent doing exactly that, and it is fortunate that he does, as the destructive power of Sacred Flame is unlike anything Ash has ever seen, immolating every single platform and even setting the surface of the water on fire. It is beautiful and terrible in equal measure, and as Pikachu surfaces, Ash calls to him, relieved to see that he's alright. However, it seems that Ash and Pikachu's nightmare is not over yet, as in a low voice, Scott reveals Ho-Oh's fourth and final move, Earthquake. All it takes is a single flap of Ho-Oh's wings to turn the pool beneath into a maelstrom, and as tidal waves begin rising up which can almost touch the ceiling, poor Pikachu finds himself right in the middle of it all. Knowing his buddy can't endure much more of this, Ash tells him to use Quick Attack, while waving his tail like a fin, a trick which surprisingly works, with Pikachu shooting out of a wave just as it reaches its zenith. This puts the rat directly above Ho-Oh, and seeing a chance to get back in the fight, Ash tells him to bring the hammer down with Iron Tail. Cheeks crackling once more in anticipation, Pikachu does exactly this, igniting his tail with a bright glow, then swinging it down so it rams between Ho-Oh's wing joints. This actually elicits a squawk of pain from the legendary, with Scott instructing it to throw Pikachu off. However, try as it might, the rainbow Pokemon is unable to be rid of its unwelcome rider, with this giving Pikachu just the opportunity he needs to blast Ho-Oh with a series of point-blank super effective Thunderbolts. By now Ho-Oh is crying out in agony, and not wanting his friend to suffer, Scott decides not to hold anything back, ordering another Brave Bird. As expected, when Ho-Oh lights itself on fire, Pikachu has no choice but to retreat, though this may not be as wise as it seems, as now that he is off Ho-Oh's back, the bird can target him with the attack, slamming its beak into Pikachu this time and sending him smacking down to Ash's trainer box, with enough force to leave a crater. For a moment, no one speaks, waiting to see if Pikachu has enough strength left to get up. Though never one to let his best friend down, Pikachu manages, staggering back to his feet and staring up at Ho-Oh as if challenging it to try again. This is a challenge Ho-Oh is more than happy to accept, with it readying another Sacred Flame on Scott's command, and as Pikachu scurries up Ash's back and springs from his head, he meets the blast with a full power Thunderbolt, which carries with it every ounce of strength the mouse has left. For a moment, these two attacks meet mid-air, the power of them keeping the other at bay, though unfortunately, this stalemate was not made to last, as while one combatant is a beast of legend, who was revered as a god by the people of ancient Johto, the other is a common rodent of no special pedigree. As a result, when one side falters, it is Pikachu, with the little electric type being consumed by flames and sent hurtling towards the ground. Taking a running leap, Ash manages to catch his burning buddy in mid-air, taking the brunt of the landing for him and using his vest to put him out. Unsurprisingly, Pikachu is unconscious after such a brutal assault, though as Ash cradles him in his arms and thanks him for putting in such a great effort, the electric rodent nuzzles his cheek against his trainer affectionately. Rising to his feet, Ash congratulates Scott and Ho on their victory, and though he wears his smile well, his friends know that he is disappointed with the outcome. Being a perceptive man, Scott asks the boy what's wrong, with Ash admitting that he was really looking forward to being a Frontier brain. Shockingly, this causes the Frontier boss to burst out in laughter, and as Ash gives him a confused and slightly offended look, Scott explains that he never said Ash had to win their battle to become a brain, just that he had to face him. In fact, none of the other 7 Frontier brains managed to beat him and Ho-Oh either, with Ash and Brandon having come the closest. This puts a smile back on Ash's face, as he asks if this means he gets to be a Frontier brain after all, with Scott nodding that he most certainly does. He then declares the Battle Junction is officially open for business, and at its head, he is proud to present the newest member of the Kanto Battle Frontier, Junction Master Ash. A few months have passed since Ash became a Frontier brain, with the young man having spent most of his time at the Battle Junction around Pallet Town training with his Pokemon. It has been nice to see his friends and family more often, though he has yet to have an official challenger to test the fruits of these training against, as all the people Scott has scouted have failed to make it to him, often falling against the earlier brains. While Ash supposes this is an occupational hazard of being the 5th Frontier brain, he would like a challenge, as things have begun to feel slow. Evidently, he is not the only one experiencing this ennui, as a few weeks earlier, Brandon had headed off to Sinnoh to explore some ancient temple, since he had nothing to do here in Kanto. Ash had been tempted to ask to go with him, though in the end he had decided to stay, as a new challenger had just beaten Nolan, and he'd been hoping to face them soon. Unfortunately, this had not come to pass, with Greta ending their Battle Frontier run, and with it, Ash's hope for a battle. In an attempt to combat this stir craziness, Ash takes a leaf from Brandon's book, going on short trips for days at a time, often visiting Pewter and Cerulean City to catch up with and occasionally train against Brock and Misty. During one of these trips, he even makes a detour to the Tree of Beginning, visiting Mew and paying his respects to Lucario. The originator of all Pokemon is happy to see the boy, and especially its pal Pikachu, with the pair being able to have the playdate they were denied during Pikachu's first visit. Nonetheless, even this is not quite enough to alleviate the feeling of inertia chafing Ash, and so it comes as a welcome surprise when one morning while training at Oak's lab, he hears a familiar voice calling to him from across the corral. Looking around, Ash spots Gary walking towards him, and so takes off to meet the other boy halfway, clasping hands and grinning that it's good to see him. Smiling as well, Gary replies that the feeling's mutual, for asking what Ash is doing here, since he thought he'd be off at his fancy new battle facility. Sighing a little, Ash explains the issue he's been experiencing with lack of challenges, to which Gary laughs that in that case, he'll help his old rival break the monotony, adding he hasn't had a good battle since he faced off with a Pokemon hunter a few months back. Beaming now, Ash implores Gary to tell him all about it in his time in Sinnoh, with the pair swapping stories for the duration of their walk to the battle junction, with Ash learning about all the new Pokemon Gary encountered, while Gary hears of Ash's Hoenn and Battle Frontier exploits, with this being the first time the two boys have met in person since the Silver Conference. Finally, they arrive at the battle junction, where Ash gives the young oak the tour, for explaining the rules of their match, and that Gary will have to battle at a type disadvantage. Being a perceptive young man, Gary quickly surmises this is to force adaptability, to which Ash grins that his old rival is right, before immediately falling on his face when Gary adds that it's just like Ash to make bonehead stubbornness in the face of bad odds a central feature of his facility. All the same, he accepts Ash's terms, meaning that a moment later the duo are on opposite sides of the battlefield, as it rises into view, showing the first match will take place on a field of rocks. Taking a moment to consider the terrain before them, Gary decides to open with his Electivire, while Ash's transfer machine gives him the only viable choice, with that being Donphan. Nodding approvingly, Gary comments that it looks like Ash has made a strong battler out of the egg he got from that time they entered the Extreme Pokemon race, though the brain should know that his Electivire is strong too, so he shouldn't take them lightly. To prove this point, he orders an Iron Tail, and with speeds rivaling some of the stronger Frontier brains, Electivire shoots forward, its twin tails glowing bright as they strike Donphan's trunk one after another, causing the roly-poly elephant to rear up and trumpet its pain before curling in on itself and going in for a rollout. However, here too Gary has a counter, having Electivire use Protect, which not only protects it from the attack, but also halts Donphan's momentum, meaning it cannot build up more speed and power, though this is hardly the ground type's biggest problem, as when it unfurls after being sent skidding back by the Protect, Electivire closes in once more and sweeps it off its feet with the first strike of another Iron Tail. Landing hard, Donphan is in no position to block the second tail, which collects it and sends it soaring end over end until it crashes into the back wall, being rendered unconscious and giving the first match to Gary. As Ash recalls his ground type, he comments that Gary's just as impressive as ever, while with a flick of his hair, Gary lightly admonishes Ash that just because he's no longer a competitive battler doesn't mean he's lost his edge, something the younger brain should keep in mind. Nodding, Ash presses the button to bring out the next battlefield, this time a grass one, and as Gary chooses Umbreon to be his second Pokemon, Ash selects Primeape. At once, it is plain to see that the pig monkey is raring to go, with Gary asking if this Primeape is a new capture. However, here Ash shakes his head, explaining that he caught it during their Kanto journey, though it's been off training for a really long time, with this being their first battle since reuniting. Grinning, Gary says in that case he almost feels bad to make it a loss, though it seems Primeape has something to say about that, or rather, scream, as with a blood-curdling howl the fighting type throws itself at its opponent the moment the match is called to start. Though Umbreon is fast, the tales of a Primeape pursuing its foe forever are not exaggerations, with the pig monkey chasing the dark type up and down the field, all the while slowly gaining ground. Wanting to lose this insane ape, Gary has Umbreon use Sand Attack, with his cat rabbit kicking up grass and dirt into Primeape's face, though even still Primeape presses on, seemingly only growing more angry thanks to this dirty trick. This rage gives Primeape just the boost in stamina it needs to close in on Umbreon, leaping at it and pinning it to the ground, much to the little dark type's distress. Primeape then proceeds to beat on Umbreon, assailing it until Gary tells the evolution to use Psychic, hoping the super effective attack will finally drive the brute away. Unfortunately, this proves fruitless, as even when the blue sonic outline of Psychic surrounds Primeape, it continues to wail on its foe, even grabbing hold of the dark type's fur so it cannot be pulled away, using the force of its fury to fight off the Psychic constriction. Gary cannot believe what he's seeing, having never known a Pokemon to be able to overcome Umbreon's Psychic, though now is hardly the time to be excited by this unusual scientific phenomena, as his Pokemon is in serious trouble, taking blow after blow from the enraged pig monkey. And so it is that a few moments later, Umbreon's eyes become spirals, signifying the end of the second round, and tying the two trainers at one apiece. Hoping to rectify this, Gary chooses his Ace Blastoise last, while Ash brings forth Sceptile for a clash of starter Pokemon on a battlefield of ice. Going first, Gary starts with an Ice Beam, knowing that the Grass Gecko is susceptible to ice moves, and due to this being an unfavourable terrain for Sceptile to move on, it is struck head-on, groaning in pain as a deep chill fills its body. Refusing to allow this to happen again, Sceptile starts to move, leaping onto one of the many icebergs dotting the field, then springing onto another, and another. This allows it to start building up speed while also staying one step ahead of Blastoise, until finally can close in with Leaf Blade, slashing twice diagonally across the tortoise's shell and skidding to a stop behind it. Letting out a bellow of pain, Blastoise retaliates by spinning around and assailing Sceptile with Hydro Pump. However, this is barely more than a refreshing drink for the grass type, with it bounding back onto the icebergs and beginning its jumping once more. Unfortunately, Gary is far too smart to fall for the same trick twice, and so analysing Sceptile's patterns, he's able to predict where the grass gecko will land next, telling Blastoise to fire an Ice Beam the moment Sceptile is in the air. As a result, the forest Pokemon is unable to change direction, landing directly in the path of the Ice Beam, and being frozen solid thanks to the water still on its skin. This leaves Sceptile completely vulnerable, something Gary does not hesitate to capitalize on, shattering the ice with a Skull Bash that sends Sceptile sprawling onto its back at Ash's feet. Even still, the gutsy gecko is able to fight, and so when Blastoise fires another Ice Beam, Sceptile rolls out of the way before firing back Bullet Seed, which causes the turtle a great deal of distress. Recognizing this as their chance to regain control in the battle, Ash and Sceptile rush in, using Quick Attack to close the distance and shoulder barge its foe before following up with another Leaf Blade, which strikes just where the first one did. Stumbling back, Blastoise suddenly looks much worse for wear, though in truth, Sceptile appears fairly worn out as well. Seeing this at the same time, the two trainers then call for their final attacks, Hydro Pump and Bullet Seed, with the two moves meeting in the middle. Due to being high-level Pokemon, neither attack can break through the other, meaning the only other option is a stalemate, with the moves exploding in the center of the field and baiting the battlefield in smoke. In unison, Ash and Gary call out for their Pokemon, though when the smoke clears, it is to reveal Sceptile standing over an unconscious Blastoise, signifying the end of the match. Withdrawing his starter, Gary praises Ash, saying he's really found his niche here, though he better not slack off since one of these days he might come back for a rematch. Grinning, Ash welcomes Gary to try, a claim which makes both boys laugh as they reflect on their shared history and how far the two of them have come from the headstrong rookies who left Palatan to become Pokemon Masters so long ago. Following this, Ash's life returns to the same somewhat monotonous routine of training, manning his post at the battle junction, and doing some light travelling. During one of these day trips, Ash comes across a wild Dunsparce, with Pikachu agreeing to battle it so he can add it to his roster, like Scott encouraged him to do. However, before Pikachu can land the finishing blow, Ash receives a call from the Frontier boss himself. Pulling out the phone Scott had given him, Ash asks what his employer is calling him about, with the laid-back man replying the young Junction Master is going to blow his stack over this. He's finally getting a challenger. As expected, this does get Ash all fired up, with him asking for any details about his opponent that Scott can give him. Grinning, Scott replies there's a new Wonder Boy from Sinnoh who has just beaten Lucy, and from what the other brains have said, he's a tactical battler, but a bit of a brute, so he's hoping Ash's facility might force him to look at things a bit differently. Nodding, Ash promises to give the boy a real challenge, though before he can hang up, Scott tells Ash there's something else he should know. This kid's big brother took the Battle Frontier challenge a while back, and made it all the way to Brandon. From what he can tell, the new challenge is only doing the Frontier so he can avenge his bro, which means he'll be holding nothing back, so Ash better do the same if he wants to stand a chance. This only makes Ash grin wider, as he says he'll be sure to keep that in mind, prompting Scott to give the boy his thanks, then end the call. Turning back to Pikachu and Dunsparce, Ash is disappointed to see that the normal type has fled, though he does receive a consolation prize a few moments later, when his phone buzzes, showing that Scott has sent him his dossier on this new challenger. Looking it over, Ash sees a boy about his own age with purple hair and a deep scowl who, according to the file, promptly demolished the first 4 Frontier brains without losing a single Pokemon. This will certainly be an interesting challenge. As Ash begins heading back to the battle junction to prepare with Pikachu on his shoulder, he once more reads the name on the top of the dossier. Paul, from Veilstone City. As promised, Paul arrives a week later with Ash greeting him warmly while trying to also convey an air of power and authority, similar to how most of the other brains did when he first met them. Unfortunately for Ash, Paul couldn't care less, respectfully but bluntly asking if they can get on with the battle already, since he's trying to earn his way back to Brandon for a rematch, and as far as he's concerned, the other Frontier brains are simply an impediment to his real goal. Intrigued by this, thanks to what Scott had told him, Ash asked Paul to explain, with the purple-haired youth revealing that during his Sinnoh League journey, he met Brandon in Snow Point City, where he agreed to a battle. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to defeat the Pyramid King, though this did not stop him, with him continuing his training and earning his way up to the semi-finals of the Lily of the Valley Conference. After falling to the man who would go on to win the league, he then returned to Brandon in Snow Point City, asking if they could have a rematch, though here he was refused, with Brandon stating he'd have to beat all the other brains for the right to face him like any other Battle Frontier challenger. Truthfully, Ash wants to ask more, but it seems Paul's patience won't abide another round of questioning, with him testily asking if they're going to battle or not. Nodding, Ash replies they are, and so explains the rules of the battle junction to Paul, while leading him to the battlefield, which in this case resembles an actual field, being made of flowers. Seeing this, Paul has no trouble choosing his first Pokemon to be Torterra, a creature Ash is unfamiliar with, though when the transfer machine shows him his choices, he sees one name who he's sure can carry him through, even in uncertain circumstances. A moment later, that Pokemon's ball is in Ash's hand, and as he hurls it into the air, Charizard bursts forth, roaring triumphantly as it soars above Torterra. Nonetheless, Paul is not deterred, calling for a Giga Drain, with spectral green tendrils lashing out in an attempt to connect with the fire type. Deftly, Charizard avoids these, before coming in to strafe Torterra with a flamethrower, which not only causes the grass type distress, but also sets the field ablaze beneath it. In one simple action, Ash has put himself in decisive command of this battle, and so holding nothing back, he orders another flamethrower. Torterra. However, this time Paul has a counter, using Giga Drain to harness the green energy tendrils as a shield, meeting Flamethrower and absorbing its damage. Frowning, Ash next tries for an overheat, hoping a stronger fire-type move might break through, though here too Giga Drain proves an effective shield, taking the brunt of the damage and ensuring Torterra survives the encounter mostly unscathed. For the next few passes, Ash attempts this from other angles, hoping Torterra has a blind spot he can exploit. However, with Paul watching its back, there is nothing the young Frontier brain can do from afar, meaning his only choice is to close in and break through the Giga Drain wall. Meeting Charizard's eyes, Ash tells his old friend to use Steel Wing, though when the Firestar swoops its prey, Paul tells Torterra to do it now, revealing Ash has just stumbled into a trap. At once, thick thorny vines shoot out from the ground, with two wrapping around Charizard's wings, while the remaining pair bind its mouth and neck, preventing the use of any further fire attacks. Paul then orders a series of stone edges, with Torterra firing them into Charizard's exposed underbelly, making it shriek in pain through its thorny muzzle. Bluntly, Paul tells Ash that this battle is over, though Ash would not be Ash if he did not have one last trick up his sleeve, calling for Charizard to free itself by setting the vines alight with its tail flame. Acting in perfect sync with its trainer, Charizard swings its tail wildly, igniting the 4 frenzy plants just as Ash had wanted, and as they begin to burn up, Charizard rips his way to freedom, removing first the one around its throat, and then the one sealing its mouth. Now at last is able to use its breath attacks again, and so turning to glare at Torterra, Charizard begins charging up one last overheat. Knowing this could be bad if left unchecked, Paul calls for a full power Stone Edge, with Torterra upping the power of its ongoing barrage, causing larger and sharper stones to fly up at Charizard's belly. Up above, Charizard is done charging, and in Ash's cry it launches the attack. Or rather, it tries to, as just before Charizard can attack, the enhanced stones pierce its stomach, putting out its internal fire and causing it to slump forward, suspended only by the last remnants of Frenzy Plant which soon burn away, dropping the lizard to the ground. Eyeing it coldly from its prone position, Paul comments that this is the Charizard who beat Nolan's Articuno, is it? His tone suggesting that he is less than impressed. Angrily, Ash snaps that it is, asking why Paul wants to know, to which the boy from Sinnoh explains that his Torterra also beat Articuno, though unlike Ash and Charizard, they did it with a Quad Ice weakness. The two trainers then return their Pokemon, as the next random battlefield appears, this time being a standard gym style. Seeing no way to get an edge with this, Paul tells his Chimchar to stand by for battle, as a small simian Pokemon bursts from its ball. Upon seeing the creature, Ash's first instinct is that it appears to be in poor health, with its stooped, twitchy posture, pinprick pupils, and a tail flame that keeps pulsating from minuscule to almost as large as the Pokemon itself. Concerned in his voice, Ash asks Paul if this Pokemon is okay to battle, though in a flat tone, Paul retorts that it's fine. At the sound of its trainer's voice, Ash sees Chimchar tense, as if scared for its life, but before he can question this, Paul barks a single command at Chimchar: Blaze. At this word, the fire monkey lets out a primal shriek as its tail flame grows exponentially and its eyes take on a soulless pink glow. Recognizing this is not a Pokemon to underestimate, Ash goes with Kingler, though when Chimchar sees this new rival, it does not hesitate to attack, barreling towards the King Crab and striking with a supersized flame wheel to the face. Hastily, Ash's Kingler responds with a super effective Crab Hammer, which knocks the chimp away, though even still this does not stop it, with Chimchar returning to the attack as soon as it is able, all the while keeping up that unnerving berserker scream. Wanting to keep Chimchar as far away from his Kingler as possible, Ash has the water type use Water Gun, though when Chimchar meets this with a blaze-powered flamethrower it is no contest, with the Water Gun being entirely evaporated and the smell of barbecue crab filling the battle junction. This of course leaves Kingler even more vulnerable than before to Chimchar's assault, with the Fire Monkey leaping onto its head and quite literally proceeding to go ape on it. Thinking fast, Ash responds by calling for a Vice Grip, with Kingler grabbing Chimchar in one of its big meaty claws and holding it at arm's length so it cannot hurt it. Unfortunately, this is a misapprehension, as while Chimchar cannot scratch or kick anymore, it can still bite, and so in spite of Kingler's carapace being far harder than its teeth, Chimchar begins to bite, ignoring its pain, or possibly even growing stronger because of it, as it bites down over and over again on Kingler's pincer. For a moment, Ash is unsure what to do, hardly able to believe the brutality of this Pokemon, which makes his Primeape seem docile in comparison, though it seems inaction is not a valid choice, as with another rage-filled scream, Chimchar manages to crack Kingler's shell with its teeth, causing the crustacean to cry out in pain, instinctively slackening its grip and allowing Chimchar to leap onto the water type's arm, where it begins winding up front of the flame wheel. Being quite literally on top of Kingler, there is nowhere the King Crab can go, and so it comes as a little surprise when a moment later the giant fireball strikes it between the eyes and knocks it out. However, even unconsciousness cannot save Kingler from the feral fire type, who continues to scratch, bite, and blast it with flames until Ash recalls Kingler and Paul does likewise with Chimchar. Due to Paul having won 2-0, there is no need for a third round, with Ash handing over the adaptability symbol, which Paul takes with a scowl, saying that this is the kid who supposedly beat Brandon. He can't imagine how he did it, since he and his Pokemon are pathetic. He then turns on his heel and strides away, ignoring the furious replies Ash hurls at his back. When Paul is gone, Ash gives Scott a call, informing of his loss to Paul and encouraging him to warn Annabelle about that berserker Chimchar. Smiling more through habit than actual joy, Scott thanks Ash for the tip, then noticing his pensive expression, asks how he's handling his first loss as a frontier brain. To his surprise, Ash replies that he's fine, since he knew that losing would come with the territory. No, what's on his mind is the fact that he's had 2 incredible battles lately, both from people who had just come from the Sinnoh region. To top it off, Brandon's over there right now, no doubt getting loads stronger, so if he wants to keep from falling behind, then it seems like he's got to go to Sinnoh too. Scott and Ash's eyes meet from across the video phone in the wake of Ash's declaration that he intends to go to Sinnoh. Briefly, the boy wonders if his employer will be annoyed that he's leaving so soon after taking up the post. Though on the contrary, Scott flashes an easy grin, saying that's perfect timing, since he's had his eye on a challenger over there, so if Ash wants to test them for him, that'd be great. Curiously, Ash asks what Scott has in mind, to which the Frontier boss laughs that he wants Ash to battle them, and see if they're Frontier caliber, like how Agatha did with him the day they met. Grinning that this is something he can definitely do, Ash hangs up the call and makes preparation to depart. As this is a new journey, he decides to start off with just Pikachu, though before he can go, he also swings by Professor Oak's lab to update his Pokédex, as well as his mum's house to bid her goodbye and receive a new change of clothes, with the hat still bearing his Frontier symbol, though this time in blue. And just like that, Ash is ready to go, catching a boat to Canalave City, as it is not only one of Sinnoh's biggest ports, but also the location of his opponent. The trip takes a little over a week due to Sinnoh being far away from Kanto, though Ash doesn't mind, doing some last minute training with Pikachu until the boat pulls into the harbour. Being eager to battle, Ash heads for the Canalave gym as soon as he's able to disembark, as this is where Scott has arranged for his opponent to meet him, though when he steps inside, he is met by a blast from the past. Is that Sir Aaron? Doing a double take, Ash realizes that while the young man is not Sir Aaron, there is a striking similarity, with them even carrying themselves in the same way, as the young challenger steps forth and introduces himself as Riley. Smiling, Ash shakes Riley's hand before asking if he's ready to battle, to which the prospective Battle Frontier challenger grins that he is, bringing forth Lucario, and cementing it in Ash's mind that there definitely must be some connection between this guy and the hero of ancient Kanto. However, it seems that Ash isn't the only one who has recognized a familiarity, as when Lucario appears, its eyes briefly narrow before looking back to Riley and barking something which makes him laugh that yes, he sensed it too. He then explains as Lucario says Ash has a strong connection with Aura, with Ash nodding that he knows, before asking if Riley is connected to Sir Aaron considering this third shared trait. Smiling self-consciously, Riley confirms himself to be a direct descendant of the hero, causing Ash to recount the story of his adventure the tree of beginning with Sir Aaron's Lucario, as well as the true story of his death. Looking sober, Riley thanks Ash for this information, promising to do honor to his ancestor's heroic name, before gently reminding him they are meant to be battling, a claim which makes Ash sweat drop as he tells Pikachu to help him out. Leaping onto the field, Pikachu's cheeks crackle as he eyes up Lucario, while Jamero, the robotic battle judge from now defunct Battle Palace who Scott had sent along to referee, announces this will be a one-on-one battle with no time limit. He then tells the pair of trainers to begin, and wanting to open strong, Ash's Pikachu goes straight into Iron Tail. Though being wily, Riley counters this with a Bone Rush, causing Lucario to create a spectral bone which catches the attack in midair and sends Pikachu skidding back. It then follows up with an Aura Sphere, though demonstrating his legendary speed, Pikachu dodges this, before firing back with a Thunderbolt which strikes true and causes Lucario to howl in pain. Pressing this advantage, Ash's Pikachu tried the Iron Tail again, with it this time striking like a blade against Lucario's throat that brings it to one knee. Worriedly, Riley asks if Lucario is okay, to which the canine growls that it is, rising back to its feet and launching a second Aura Sphere. However, this one is just as ill-fated as the first, with Pikachu slicing in half with another Iron Tail before coming in for a quick attack with the intent of ending things here. Unfortunately, this time Riley is ready for the close quarters attack, with Lucario using Bone Rush once again to strike Pikachu on top of the head with a super effective ground type move. This leaves the mouse vulnerable to a follow-up close combat that sees Pikachu being battered by a barrage of paws before being sent crashing back into the dirt of the battlefield. Nonetheless, Pikachu is far too gutsy to go down like this, and so on Ash's cry, leaps back into the fight, this time bathing himself in electric energy as he charges down the field with Volt Tackle. Recognizing this as a finishing move, Riley calls for another close combat to stop Pikachu in his tracks, with the fighting type springing into action as it swings a fist at Pikachu's face. For a moment, this collision brings both Pokemon to a standstill. Then, with a confident grin born of being the partner of Frontier Brain, Pikachu breaks through, blowing Lucario's fist back and striking in the chest with enough force that it goes flying into the back wall of the gym, ending the battle. Letting out an excited cheer, Pikachu then leaps into Ash's arms, with the Junction Master hugging his buddy as he calls that battle incredible. Smiling despite his loss, Riley agrees, before recalling Lucario and asking if he passed whatever test Scott said Ash was conducting on him. From Jamero's speakers, the voice of the Frontier boss then speaks up, telling Riley that he did, which means he is now eligible to take on the Battle Frontier Challenge. Scott then thanks Ash, saying that he can take it from here, though he suggests that the boy make Jubilife City his next port of call, as there will be a surprise waiting for him there. Thanking his boss for the heads up, Ash departs the gym, stopping off at the Pokemon Center to get Pikachu healed before traveling east along Route 218. This brings him to Jubilife City a few days later, where he quickly realizes what Scott meant by a surprise when Annabelle and her Espeon come running up to him. Grinning, Ash asks what the Salon Maiden is doing here, to which Annabelle answers that Scott informed her that Ash was heading on a short journey when he passed on the message about that Chimchar, so she decided to tag along after her battle with Paul. Ash then asks how her match went, though this caused Annabelle to become somewhat dejected as she admits that she lost too, though that's not what bothers her, it's Chimchar. Through her empathic abilities, she could sense how much anger and fear it was feeling, even when not in its blaze state. Such constant stress cannot be good for it, with it barely being able to stand by the end of their battle, due to the strain such a state of mind was putting on its body. Looking grim, Ash says that he dreads to think what Chimchar had to endure to wind up like that, with Annabelle nodding her agreement, before commenting that it's up to Brandon now to set Paul straight. Curiously, Ash asks if that means the Pyramid King has returned to Kanto, though here Annabelle shakes her head, saying that from what she's heard, he's still in Snow Point, meaning that if Ash wants, they can head up there and see if they can catch Paul and Brandon's battle. Agreeing that this sounds like a good goal, Ash asks how they are meant to get to Snow Point City, with Annabelle explaining the most common route is to hike across Mount Coronet in the center of the region, since from there it's only a few days' trek to the city. Having no better plan, Ash tells Annabelle to lead on, with the goal directing them north towards Floroma Town. On the way, Ash has several quick battles, with Pikachu promptly cleaning house, and while they do not challenge him after spending so long facing opponents that are said to be on par with the Elite Four members, the simple act of making new friends through battling while exploring a new region does wonders for Ash's spirits, with Annabelle only realizing how much the ennui of stagnation had been wearing on the boy as it starts to lift at last. Likewise, the sight of Floroma Town is a new place Ash has never seen before only bolsters his good mood, causing Annabelle to laugh that Ash really loves traveling, doesn't he? Smiling, Ash replies that yeah, going on adventures with friends is the best thing in the world, and while he thinks being a Frontier Brand is awesome, he can only grow so much in one place. Nodding, Annabelle concedes that in that way he's a lot like Brandon, before adding in a tone of admiration that maybe that's why they're both so incredibly powerful. Rubbing the back of his head and laughing, Ash retorts that he's still got a long way to go, saying he wants to get strong enough to beat Scott and Ho-Oh, since they're the most powerful pair he's ever seen. Grinning, Annabelle promises that one day he will be. She knows it. In fact, if what she heard about his initiation battle is true, he might be closer to that goal than he realizes. From here, the rest of the trip to Mount Coronet goes smoothly, with Ash's renewed passion and devotion to his end goal inspiring him to spar with Annabelle and Espeon most evenings when they stop to make camp. This sees both Pokemon grow exponentially, while also deepening Ash and Annabelle's bond, so that when they reach the foot of Mount Coronet a few weeks later, Ash feels as close to the lilac-haired girl as he does to Brock, Misty, May, and Max. Upon setting eyes on the mountain that is said to be the birthplace of Sinnoh and maybe the entire world, Ash cannot help but be hit by a sense of awe, with even places like Mount Moon and Mount Silver seeming small in comparison. Following Annabelle up the mountain trail that will lead them to Route 216, Ash briefly wishes they had thought to bring a coat, or maybe one of his fire types, as the cold winds blowing from the north quickly turn him into an Ashsicle, with Pikachu having to take refuge in his vest to keep warm. Thankfully, something soon comes along to distract Ash from the cold, with that being a fellow traveler coming the opposite way. From the looks of him, Snow Point City must be even more frigid than up here, as he is dressed in a long green coat, as well as a headscarf which obscures most of his face. When he gets close, Ash can feel the man's eyes on him, even if he cannot see them, with this hunch being proven right a moment later when he asks if he is Junction Master Ash of the Battle Frontier. Nodding, Ash says that he is, to which the green-coated stranger declares that he wants a battle right now, and he won't let Ash and Annabelle pass until his demands are met. Despite this forceful way of asking, Ash is happy to accept, asking Pikachu to do him a solid in battle for him, with the electric rodent cheerfully agreeing, his shared love for battling being enough to coax him from his warm resting place. Stepping to the side so that she can referee, Annabelle tells the stranger to bring out his Pokemon, with him releasing a large bipedal Pokemon that resembles a Rhydon with extra bulk and lumpy orange armor. Pulling out his Pokédex, Ash learns that this Pokemon is called Rhyperior, and that it is Rhydon's evolution, a fact which greatly excites him, as he had no idea that Pokemon evolved. He then tells Pikachu to use Thunderbolt, though unfortunately this is wholly ineffective, due to Rhyperior being a part ground type, with the Scarfed Man telling that Ash reminds him of his son, always running off before thinking things through. He then demonstrates the power of a more methodical approach, calling for a Rock Wrecker, with a heavy-looking boulder shooting from Rhyperior's palm and striking Pikachu head-on. Squealing in pain, Pikachu is sent tumbling back along the mountain path, though neither he nor Ash are deterred in the slightest, with the electric type quickly springing back to his feet as Ash tells him to try again, but this time to aim for the horn. Remembering their battle with Blaine, Pikachu obeys, raining lightning down upon Rhyperior's horn, though when the barrage ceases, Rhyperior appears completely fine. Grinning under his wrappings, the man chuckles that simple tricks like that won't work against him, since he and Rhyperia trained to overcome that little weakness years ago. He then adds that this shouldn't be too big a problem for Ash though, since he is the adaptability brain, so he's sure he'll be able to adapt to this. Gritting his teeth, Ash is forced to reappraise his game plan, as with half of Pikachu's moves now completely useless, he needs to come up with a way to win, with the limited move pool left to him. Thankfully, Annabelle has laid yell her encouragement, saying that Ash can still win, he just needs to iron out the kinks in his strategy, a claim which gives Ash an idea, as he calls for an Iron Tail. At once, Pikachu's tail begins to glow, and as he leaps at Rhyperia, the draw Pokemon is forced to use Mega Horn to block it, knowing how devastating this could be. Recognizing this concern, Ash tells Pikachu to keep it up, with tail clashing against Horn over and over as each salvo pushes Rhyperia a little further back, towards the edge of the path. Unfortunately for the green-jacketed man, he only sees this when it's too late, as one last Iron Tail causes his rock ground type to stumble back into open air, resulting in tumbling end over end and becoming a giant snowball as it rolls down the side of the mountain. Sounding impressed, the stranger comments that he sees now how Ash managed to advance so far, calling him wily and praising his use of the terrain. However, it seems that Ash isn't done yet, as with a grin, he tells Pikachu to use Volt Tackle to follow Rhyperia, with the enhanced speed of the move allowing the electric Rodent to keep his footing as he runs down the decline and finally manages to outpace Rhyperia, before circling back to bed it up the mountain with Iron Tail. Thanks to the momentum gained from this charge, as well as the heat produced by Volt Tackle, not only is this enough to send Rhyperia flying, but also douse it in super effective water, thanks to the snow it has accumulated all melting. However, this is hardly Rhyperia's biggest concern, as with a cheer, Ash tells Pikachu to test if the draw Pokemon's electric-proof conditioning still applies when it's covered in water, something the electric rodent seems equally keen to test, as he turns all the kinetic energy he's just created into a massive thunderbolt, which briefly dyes the entire mountainside bright yellow. When the light of this colossal attack fades, no one is surprised to see Rhyperia unconscious, with its trainer laughing as he calls Ash and Pikachu an incredible pair. Smiling too, Ash tells the man he's pretty awesome himself, suggesting that he ought to take the Battle Frontier challenge, though this only causes the man to laugh harder, as he says that while he's flattered Ash thinks so, he's afraid that is not possible, before throwing off his headscarf and declaring himself none other than Palmer. Looking back to Annabelle, Ash asks if he's supposed to know who that is, causing Palmer to hang his head dejectedly, as he decides that he's one of the Sinnoh Frontier Brains, before apologizing for the subterfuge, and saying that when Scott told him Ash was coming, he couldn't resist seeing his strength for himself, since the Frontier boss always speaks highly of the boy. Eagerly, Ash asks what Scott says about him, though with some light chiding, Annabelle tells her companion that now isn't the time to be standing around chatting, since it's freezing. Laughing that he forgot in the heat of the battle, Ash bids Palmer goodbye, though with a grin, the Sinnoh Brain says that if the kids want, he'd be happy to escort them to Snow Point, since he presumes they're on their way to visit Brandon. Happy to accept help, the pair confirm they are, with the duo subsequently becoming a trio as they make their way for Snow Point City. Following another week of frosty trekking, in which Ash gets to know Palmer a lot better, the team finally arrive at Snow Point, where their first port of call is the Pokemon Center, both to heal their Pokemon and warm themselves with a mug of hot chocolate. Following this revival, the trio head directly to the Battle Pyramid, where they are pleased to find its interior pleasantly toasty, though this is not due to any environmental controls, but rather the battle taking place in the center of the main room. It seems that Ash, Annabelle, and Palmer are later than they had thought, as Brandon and Paul are already engaged in the final stages of a fierce duel, with their Berserk Chimchar's blaze-powered flamethrower clashing with Regice's Ice Beam. From their place by the entryway, it seems the pair of moves are evenly matched, with Brandon acknowledging that Paul is a lot stronger than the last time they battled, but this is not good enough for Paul, who barks at Chimchar to use his full power to get him the win. Like it was during the battle against Ash, this harsh tone seems to ratchet up Chimchar's fear, and with it, its power, with the already impressive flamethrower becoming a devastating inferno, reminiscent of Ho-Oh's Sacred Flame. Apparently, the strength of this move is even comparable, as it immediately overcomes the legendary Regice, who is completely consumed in flames. Wanting to make sure this is a decisive blow, Paul instructs Chimchar to keep up the heat, with the little chimp obediently screaming more and more flames until Brandon commands them both to stop, saying the battle is over, and that Paul has won. It is only now that Paul allows Chimchar to cease its assault, with it promptly collapsing, its tail flame now barely more than a few embers, suggesting that it has quite literally burned itself out on Paul's orders. Unfortunately, Chimchar is not the only one to come out of this fight looking worse for wear, with Regice more closely resembling a melting ice cream cone than an iceberg. Recalling it so it can refreeze, Brandon reiterates that Paul has won, and that he hopes that with this victory, Paul will perhaps be able to let go of some of the anger that has been driving his battling style up until now. Paul says nothing to this, merely holding out his hand for the brave symbol. As the Pyramid King lays it in his palm, Scott, who is also in attendance, gives the boy a slightly unnerved version of the congratulations he gave Ash when he won against Brandon. This includes the offer to become a brain for the Sinnoh region, which Paul accepts without hesitation, the first thing resembling emotion crossing his face, as he locks eyes with the person sitting beside Scott, a man with a purple ponytail, who Ash assumes is Paul's brother, the one who tried and failed to become a Frontier brain a few years back. As this exchange takes place, Ash rushes over to check on Chimchar, who seems to be struggling to breathe in its state of exertion. Spotting Ash at last, Paul simply asks what he's doing here, as with seemingly no concern, he recalls Chimchar to its ball. Glaring at the newly minted brain, Ash snaps that Paul's got a rotten attitude treating Chimchar like that. Though in that same unfeeling voice, Paul retorts that he doesn't see what business of Ash's it is how he treats his Pokemon. In contrast, Ash is only getting more wound up, as he snarls that he doesn't want to see any Pokemon treated like that. But now that Paul's going to be representing the battle frontier, he can't allow that sort of behavior to continue, declaring that he wants a rematch so he can show Paul the proper way to raise a Pokemon. Scoffing under his breath, Paul says that's fine by him, since Ash was a pathetic opponent last time, so it won't take him long to beat him again. However, before either boy can pull a Pokeball, Scott steps between them, telling them to hold it, since now's not the time, but they'll get their rematch really soon. Curiously, Ash and Paul both ask what Scott's talking about, to which the Frontier boss explains that with Paul now giving them an even number of Sinnoh and Kanto Frontier brains, it's time to do something he's wanted to do for ages, host a Frontier Brain tournament to determine once and for all who is the best of the best. At Scott's pronouncement of a Frontier Brain tournament, all eyes fall upon the sunglasses-clad man, with him grinning that he's had this whole shebang planned for a really long time, and it's going to be a spectacle unlike anything they've ever seen. He then looks as though he's going to say more, though when the man who Ash assumes to be Paul's brother clears his throat, the Frontier boss stops himself, saying that Reggie's right, he doesn't want to spoil the surprise, at least not until all the brains are present. He then bids them all farewell, though not before instructing them to rendezvous at Palmer's Battle Tower, since that's where the tournament begins. And just like that, Scott departs, leaving Ash, Annabelle, Palmer, Brandon, Paul, and Reggie alone in the pyramid. At once, Paul makes a beeline for his brother, stating that he finally did it. He beat Brandon, and became a Frontier Brain just like Reggie always wanted. However, instead of pride, the man with the ponytail simply asks at what cost. Deep disappointment in his eyes and tone. Meanwhile, Ash and Annabelle have made their way over to Brandon, greeting their fellow Kanto Brain and asking how he's faring after that loss. Stoic as ever, Brandon replies he had hoped that making Paul fight his way through the other brains might have helped him through his misplaced anger, similar to how he tried to guide Ash away from his own hubris during his Frontier run. However, it seems this was overly optimistic, so now he will have to wait and see if victory might be the closure the purple-haired boy needed. Stubbornly, Ash retorts that he's not about to just wait around and see what happens, since after what Paul's put Chimchar through, he needs to be taught a lesson. Smiles slightly curving the corners of his lips, Brandon comments that he had a feeling his young colleague would say something like that, adding that he sees a lot of similarities between Ash and Paul, so perhaps he's the only one who can set him straight. He then heads over to speak with Palmer, with Ash turning to Annabelle and asking if she at least agrees with him, to which the lilac-haired girl nods, saying that during that battle, she used her empathic powers to check on Chimchar once more, and from what she felt, Chimchar's deterioration has only gotten worse since her battle with Paul a few weeks back. Looking troubled, Ash asks what exactly that means, with Annabelle grimly replying that to put it bluntly, if Paul doesn't change his ways soon, Chimchar will die. This news hangs heavily over Ash for the rest of the day, with the young Junction Master barely speaking as he and Annabelle set about looking for a way to get to the battle tower, having been informed by Palmer about the location of his facility during their trip to Snowpoint. Fortunately, they are soon able to come across a ferry headed for the small island to the east, and so book passage, agreeing to meet back here in the morning. It seems the other brains have their own means of transport, as Ash and Annabelle are the only ones to catch the ferry the next day, though when they arrive on the battle zone a day later, they are not the only brains present, spotting their 5 Kanto colleagues, as well as 5 new faces, who are speaking with Palmer and Paul. Approaching the Sinnoh brains, Ash and Annabelle introduce themselves, in turn getting to know Thornton, Dahlia, Derek, Caitlin, and Argenta, all of whom seem excited to participate in the tournament. Well, almost all of them, as Caitlin loudly comments that she had planned to take a nap today, before Scott had dragged her out to this island. As if he had heard her, or perhaps because he'd been waiting for everyone to arrive, Scott chooses this moment to descend on the back of his ho-ho, greeting everyone and welcoming them to the Frontier Championship. He then begins to explain the rules, saying that this tournament will be rather unique, as the entire island of the battle zone will be their battlefield, with them battling it out in a series of single elimination battles until there is only one brain left standing. Curiously, Lucy asks how matchups are determined, with Scott grinning that he's glad she asked. There will be no designated pairings, with this being a complete free-for-all, meaning any brain can challenge any other, regardless of which region they represent. However, to help them find opponents, he has had his people specially modify a series of Poketches, so they will show a map of the island, with little dots to represent each brain who is still active in the tournament. Though this isn't the only neat thing they can do, as they can also be used to issue challenges and transfer in any Pokemon the wearer possesses, similar to the transfer machine in the Battle Junction. The brains should choose carefully who they transfer in though, since each battle is a 1v1, so a bad choice could end their tournament run before it even begins. He then starts handing out the devices, while informing his employees of the final 2 rules. The first is that since this island is full of high-level wild Pokemon, they are free to capture them and use them in the tournament if they wish. And the second is they should remember to put on their game faces, since this whole tournament is being televised to raise awareness for the battle frontier. At these words, Ho-Oh takes off into the sky, followed by a fleet of Jameros, signaling the start of the tournament, causing Ash to immediately scan around for Paul, though it seems the purple-haired youth has already brought out a Honchkrow and taken to the air. Not wanting to let the other boy get away, Ash activates his new Poketch and uses the transfer function to have Pidgeot sent over before he and Pikachu scramble onto the big bird's back and give chase. Due to it still being fairly early in the day, the cloud cover is still quite low, resulting in Ash soon losing sight of Paul. Figuring that his Poketch's map will come in handy here, Ash looks down at the little screen, though to his dismay, there is no way of telling who Paul is, as it seems almost every bren has begun to scatter, seeking out old rivals or terrain where their Pokemon and battling style will have an edge. Taking a guess that the nearest dot will be Paul, Ash decides to follow it, hanging a left and soon surmising that it must be heading for that big mountain range near the battle tower. Ducking below the clouds, Ash sees that the person he is tailing is not in fact Paul, but someone on a Togekiss, though before he can change course, his Poketch beeps, informing him that he has been challenged by Arcade Star Dahlia, and asking if he'd like to transfer in any Pokemon. Briefly, Ash weighs his options until he hears a voice above the whipping winds, that of Dahlia, as she calls out asking if he'd like an aerial battle since they both already have their flyers here. Seeing this as a fun challenge, and a chance to do something he doesn't have much experience with, Ash happily accepts, causing Dahlia to grin that she knew it'd be cool, before teasing that she just hopes he won't cry when he loses, since her Togekiss is number 1 in the air. She then attempts to prove this with a high-speed charge, which sees her flying omelette rake its wing along Pidgeot's underbelly before making a sharp turn to fire a point-blank aura sphere at its back. This causes Pidgeot to squawk in pain, but having faced worse, it quickly rights itself and retaliates with a gust attack which buffets Dahlia and Togekiss, as the Arcade Star laughs that it seems Ash battles just like her, hit him fast and hit him hard. Good, since she hates battling eggheads who overthink everything and don't know how to go with the flow. Smiling now too, Ash replies that he knows the feeling, then after telling Pikachu to hold on tight, gives his next command, Wing Attack. Dahlia tells her flyer to do likewise, and at once the two speedy avians soar at each other, their wings clashing like jousting lances, before Togekiss is sent flipping forward mid-air, having clearly lost this little duel. Gripping tight to her Pokemon, Dahlia praises that Ash is the real deal alright, but let's see how he does at a distance. She then rises to her feet on Togekiss's back, telling it to use Hyper Beam, and without hesitation, the Jubilee Pokemon fires off a large orange burst of energy, which flies right at Ash, Pikachu, and Pidgeot. Patting Pidgeot's flank, Ash asks if it's ready, with the bird Pokemon trilling confidently, before it takes off, going from 0 to Mark 3 in a matter of seconds. In the face of such overwhelming speed, not only does Togekiss not have a chance to adjust its aim to strike Pidgeot, but it cannot even move before it is struck with a super-powered wing attack. If this were not enough to take it out, what follows certainly would be, as a moment later, the sound of that impact catches up with Pidgeot, taking the form of a sonic boom, which blasts Togekiss into unconsciousness, while also sending Dahlia flying off into the open air. Exhibiting a bit more of that incredible speed, Pidgeot is able to catch her though, before similarly grabbing Togekiss in its claws so that it does not hit the ground. Giving her thanks to Ash and Pidgeot, Dahlia concedes the match, causing her dot to vanish on the map as she asks the pair to put her and Togekiss down on that nearby mountain range. Happily complying, Ash does so, before recalling Pidgeot since it deserves a break after that battle. Playfully telling the boy not to make her look bad by losing to anyone else, Dahlia follows suit, returning Togekiss to its ball, then beginning to walk back to the battle tower to watch the rest of the matches in comfort. As she goes, Ash looks around, seeing if any of the other brains are within sight so he can challenge them. To his pleasant surprise, he does see someone ducking into a cave further down the mountain, and though he doesn't recognize who it is from his fleeting glance, he figures it wouldn't hurt to follow and get a closer look. Sliding to the cave entrance, Ash and Pikachu step inside, being surprised at how clearly they can see in here thanks to the veins of magma running through the walls, which act almost like natural lamps. Following the sound of footsteps in the distance, Ash soon discovers the person he is following is not Paul or any of the other Frontier brains. In fact, it's not even one person, it's a trio of shady looking people, carrying a glowing reddish-orange stone that looks like lava made solid. Having figured everyone else had been cleared off the island for the tournament, Ash asks what they're doing here, with the sound of his voice alerting the ne'er-do-wells, causing their seeming leader to bark at the other two to hang back and drive off this brat, while he uses the magma stone to bring Heatran under his control. At once, the subordinate pair break off, while the leader advances, bringing out a stun tank and Parugly, though even combined, they are no match for Pikachu, who blasts them both with Thunderbolt, allowing Ash to press forward. Taking off at a run now, Ash and Pikachu attempt to close in on the man, though to their dismay, when they step into a chamber filled with lava near the back of the mountain, they find him holding the stone aloft, as he orders Heatran to come forth and serve him. A second later, a Pokemon unlike Ash has ever seen before bursts from beneath the surface of the lava, climbing up the wall of the cavern like some sort of spider, before dropping down to stand between Ash and his target. Up close, Ash sees that like the stone the man is holding, it appears to be a creature made of magma, though with pieces of steely armor around its head and feet. There is a majestic radiance to the way this creature glows, all except its eyes, which remain dull, as if something is clouding them. Cackling arrogantly, the man with the magma stone states that Heatran's first order as his loyal thrall is to destroy this interfering brat and his Pikachu. And though for a moment the beast looks hesitant, when the magma stone pulses, it complies, firing off a heat wave which Ash and Pikachu have to leap out of the way to avoid, resulting in a thick stalagmite just behind where the pair was standing being reduced to a molten puddle in an instant. Taking this as their warning of how strong Heatran is, Ash and Pikachu ready themselves, though truthfully, Ash doesn't want to hurt the Lava Dome Pokemon, seeing as how it isn't really trying to hurt them. To this end, he begins formulating a plan for how to get the stone from the bad guy, figuring once he does that, Heatran will stop attacking. Unfortunately, Ash isn't given much time to strategize, as in its master's command, Heatran begins levitating large chunks of scalding stone and hurling them at the heroes, forcing Ash to do what he does best, adapt. Looking to his buddy, he tells him to use Iron Tails and Thunderbolts, anything it takes to hold Heatran at bay without hurting it, while he'll take the other guy. Nodding determinedly, Pikachu begins a barrage of bolts, exploding the stones in midair, not only proving his might to be equal to that of Heatran's, but also clearing Ash a path to charge headlong at the villain. Letting out a roar of indignation, the old man declares that this impudent brat has no place interfering with his genius. Though with a growl, Ash retorts that no one can call themselves a genius if they mistreat Pokemon, before barreling into the baddie and causing them both to tumble over. This also sends the Magma Stone flying into the air, with the pair both scrambling to their feet and attempting to catch it. Having longer legs, the man quickly gets a lead on Ash, with it seeming like he'll be the one to recover his prize, though Ash is not out of tricks yet, as with a cry he asks Pikachu to help him out. Being in perfect sync with his trainer, Pikachu abandons his current strategy of batting away rocks, instead using Quick Attack to leap from Flying Stone to Flying Stone, until he is close enough to the Magma Stone that he can strike it with an Iron Tail, sending it shooting back towards Ash, who takes a running leap and catches it. Letting out an anguished roar, the old man snarls that a mere child cannot hope to control the raw power of Heatran, though in a firm tone, Ash replies that he isn't going to control Heatran, he's going to free it. He then hurls the Magma Stone at the cave floor, causing the glowing rock to shatter into a million pieces, and the luster to at last return to Heatran's eyes. Now with nothing to hold it back, the blazing beast rounds on its former master, fury on its face. Desperately, the old man tries to intimidate Heatran, commanding it to yield to his superior will, but this attempted dominance is somewhat undercut by the eruption of a fiery geyser directly beneath him, which sends him shooting through the cave roof, with his bum on fire. With the original intruder now gone, Heatran next turns his molten eyes on Ash and Pikachu, though when Ash gives it a smile, thanking it for getting rid of the bad guy and asking if it's okay, the Heat Dome Pokemon reciprocates the gesture, trudging up to the boy and rubbing its armored face against his side. From behind him, Ash then hears a familiar voice, that of Annabelle, as she grins that it looks like Ash has made a new friend, before adding that she managed to apprehend the two women as they were fleeing, with Espeon currently escorting them to the island's officer Jenny. Thanking her for the assist, Ash prepares to go, bidding Annabelle and Heatran goodbye, though before he can, his Pokédex beeps, stating he has been issued a challenge by Salon Maiden Annabelle. While still with that grin on her face, Annabelle reminds her compatriot they are still in the middle of a tournament. Allowing a smile to form on his own lips, Ash accepts the challenge, though before he can cycle through his roster, Annabelle makes a request, saying she'd like to have a battle with Heatran if that's possible. Not wanting to make Heatran do anything it doesn't want, Ash looks to the Fire Steel type, asking if it would be okay with this, to which Heatran rumbles in the affirmative, giving Ash another smile as it trudges over to stand between him and Annabelle. Looking a little sheepish, the Salon Maiden then says that she hates to keep making requests, but she does have one more. Can they please have this battle outside, since she's sweating like a grumpig in here? A few minutes later, the group of Ash, Pikachu, Annabelle and Heatran find themselves standing on a rocky plateau outside Stark Mountain, ready to begin their battle. With Espeon off escorting the crooks, Ash asks who his friend is going to use, with Annabelle grinning that actually, he hasn't met this Pokemon yet, since she caught it after her loss to him during his Battle Frontier run. This only excites Ash more, asking what it is, to which Annabelle enigmatically answers that it's a perfect rival for Heatran, before using her Pokédex to summon an Ultra Ball, which she tosses to bring forth the legendary beast of thunder, Raikou. Landing gracefully, Raikou lets out a roar like a thunderclap, though even still, Ash and Heatran are undeterred, with Ash whipping out his Pokédex and quickly learning Heatran's moves. He then takes the first move, calling for an Earth Power, though being faster, Raikou is easily able to pounce away from the erupting geyser, before hitting back with an extra sensory, which while ineffective, still does some damage to Heatran. Worriedly, Ash asks if the Heat Dome Pokemon is okay, though staying strong, it nods, then on his command, fires back a prolonged heat wave, which quickly heats the entire air, making it inescapable, and paying Raikou back for the psychic attack. Grinning, Annabelle then asks Ash if they're done warming up, to which the young Junction Master nods, causing both Pokemon to shift into high gear. As one, the two Frontier Brains then call for their strongest moves, Magma Storm for Heatran and Zap Cannon for Raikou, with the blasts of lava and electricity clashing in midair, as both Pokemon attempt to show dominance. However, just as Raikou is the superior one in terms of speed, so is Heatran when it comes to mastery mastery of its element, with a torrent of bubbling magma breaking through the bolts and scalding the cat, who hisses in fury. Wanting to retaliate, Annabelle has it respond with Thunderfang. There was fearsome electricity crackles in Raico's jaw. Ash has Heatran meet it with Stone Edge. Like in the magma chamber, large stone chunks then begin soaring at Raico, and while he's able to reduce the first few pebbles by chomping down on them, this is not sustainable, with the rock soon burying the Sabertooth. Sadly, this is not the worst of it for Annabelle, as now that Raico cannot move, it is helpless against the super effective earth power forming beneath its feet, so that when the eruption occurs, it along with the massive stones is sent crashing into the side of Stark Mountain, before rolling back down to the plateau where it lies unconscious, ending the Battle of Legends and Annabelle's run in the Frontier Championship. Recalling Raico with her thanks, Annabelle congratulates Ash and Heatran on their victory, smiling they're a formidable pair, and that if Ash were to catch the Heat Dome Pokemon, it would be a great addition to the Battle Junction's roster, since he doesn't yet have a Steel type. Smiling too, Ash agrees that would be cool, though it seems the most enthusiastic one is Heatran, who nudges Ash's side again, as if asking what he's waiting for. Smilingly growing, Ash asks if the Fire Steel type is sure, then when it rumbles its affirmation, he pulls out a Pokeball and catches it, adding the legendary Pokemon to his team. Following this capture, Ash parts way with Annabelle, heading back down the mountain to seek out his next challenger, though he isn't left to wait for long, as before he can even make it onto Route 226, he sees Paul and Chimchar waiting for him. Wasting no time with preamble, Paul states that he saw Ash's battle with Annabelle, and so demands that Ash bring out Heatran so he can face it too. But with a cold look in his eyes, Ash refuses, stating that all Paul respects is power, and while Heatran is powerful, he wants to show Paul a different kind of power, one he and another friend earned together born of trust and mutual respect. He then adds this Pokemon once had a trainer like Paul, and when it left him and actually found a trainer who loved it for who it is, not what it can do, that's when it truly reached its full potential, something his Chimchar will never achieve while it's being treated like dirt. He then taps his Poketch, manifesting a ball which he throws into the air, revealing Charizard. Dismissively, Paul retorts that he already beat that loser lizard, but still resolute, Ash replies that in that case, he should have no problem doing so again, without that quite effective Stone Edge this time. Never one to back down, Paul agrees that he will, and so the ideological rematch begins. Taking the first move this time, Ash calls for a flamethrower, while Paul, having forced Chimchar into its unbridled blaze state, does likewise, with the two moves clashing in mid-air. For the most part, it seems they are comparable in power, though there is one key difference. This is Chimchar's ceiling, while Charizard is just getting warmed up. To prove this, Ash calls for overheat, with Charizard's flamethrower being replaced by an orange orb, which cuts through Chimchar's torrent of flame as if it were nothing, before striking it head-on and sending it soaring into the air with a squeal. Landing hard on its back, Chimchar groans in pain, though savagely Paul barks it to get back up, with the Manic Monkey doing exactly that, its pink eyes still alight with rage as it employs a flame wheel to fly into the air, screaming as it does. Bellowing ferociously, Charizard meets this with a Steel Wing, and though it's not as decisive as Overheat, it does manage to break through Chimchar's assault, knocking it out of the wheel and leaving it exposed to a Dragon Breath that sends it plunging back down to the ground. As this happens, Ash and Paul both notice that several Chimeras are watching them, taking footage of the battle from different angles. Checking a hunch, Ash takes a look at his Poketch, with it confirming that he and Paul are the last two brains in this competition, meaning not only will this be the place where one of them proves the validity of their ideals, but it will also be the match to determine who is the winner of this tournament. With a hint of pride, Ash informs Paul of this, though it seems the purple-haired boy doesn't want to know, instead asking how Charizard is so much stronger than last time. Confidently, Ash replies that it's not. The difference is him. He's grown as a trainer and learned from his mistakes, while Paul hasn't, though hopefully, by the time this battle is over, that will have changed. He then orders another flamethrower, which douses Chimchar, causing the smaller fire type to stagger a bit as it gets to its feet, some of the gusto having left it. Nonetheless, on Paul's command, it lets loose another flamethrower of its own, while from the other side of the field, Ash tells Charizard to do the same. Like the first one, this proves to be a stalemate, even with Charizard having lost a bit of firepower due to overheat. Knowing about this drawback, Paul yells at Chimchar to end things, with the chimp trying its best, terror in its screeches. Subsequently, the flames of this flamethrower grow significantly bigger, though even still, they cannot break through, with Ash informing Paul that Chimchar's at its limit, and that he pushed it too far, whereas he and Charizard have energy to spare. He then tells his Firestar to show Paul the power of their bond, and with another bellow, Charizard obeys, creating a pillar of flame 3 times the size of Chimchar's, consuming the monkey and its attack, while even causing Paul's hair and clothes to whip around from the massive amount of heat radiating from the move. When it fades, Chimchar is unconscious on the ground, having curled into a fetal position at the last moment to protect itself, while in contrast, Charizard looks as strong as ever as it lands beside Ash, receiving a hug from its trainer and playfully blasting him with Flamethrower in response. It is only now that Ash turns his attention to Paul, who is staring at his Pokemon hollow-eyed, the true weight of this loss hitting him all at once, as he is forced to accept not only has his ideology been proven false, but it has happened in front of the whole world. Approaching the purple-haired boy with Charizard by his side, Ash tells Paul that this was always going to happen sooner or later, since while he was able to draw out a great deal of power from Chimchar, he did it in the wrong way, by forcing it beyond what its body is capable of handling, and worse, by using fear to trigger that change. While this could work in the short term, it stunted Chimchar's capacity to grow, just like it stunted him as a trainer, while in contrast, he and Charizard have limitless potential, due to them growing together as partners and as friends. He then looks at Chimchar's dwindling tail flame, and in a sad but firm voice, says this might be Paul's last chance to learn this lesson, before it's too late for both him and Chimchar. So unless he wants that, it's time to take a long, hard look inside, and reconsider what the real path he should be on is. For a moment, no one speaks. Then, in a gruff tone, Paul concedes that this battle has given him food for thought at the very least. He then returns Chimchar to its ball, and though he cannot confirm it, Ash thinks he has a bit more respect in the other boy's voice, as he tells his fire monkey they need to get to Nurse Joy. Still silent, Ash watches the pair go, making a mental note to keep an eye on his rival moving forward, as while this is not the complete ideological shift he'd been hoping for, he can see the seeds of change already taking root in the other boy, and for that he is hopeful, not only for Paul's sake, but for Chimchar's too. He then receives a buzz on his Poketch, with it being a notification that as the winner of the tournament, he is required back at the battle tower. Hitching a ride on Charizard's back, Ash soon finds himself in the tower's courtyard, where all the other Frontier brains are assembled. Here Scott presents the young Junction Master with a handshake and a trophy, naming him the Champion Brain, and congratulating him on his achievement. However, this is not the only prize Ash has won, as with a grin, Scott tells Ash that if he wants it, he is entitled to take part in an exhibition match against him. Seeing this is the chance he wanted to face Scott's Ho-Oh again, Ash eagerly accepts, with the other brains applauding, as the Frontier boss grins widely, stating he knew he could count on Ash, and promising they will make this a battle no one ever forgets. 3 months have passed since the Frontier Championship, with Ash having returned to the Battle Junction while Scott prepares for their match, having promised that this delay will be more than worth it for what he has planned. Thankfully, Ash has planned to occupy his time, as due to the tournament being televised, dozens of trainers have started taking the Battle Frontier Challenge, with Ash being the brain they all want to battle. In light of this, and his title as Champion Brain, Ash is quickly promoted to the 7th brain of Kanto, taking Brandon's spot as the de facto head of their group. Though at first the boy is a bit put off by this prospect, especially since his success has meant a demotion for Annabelle and Brandon, he is met with nothing but support from his fellow brains, with Annabelle teasing that being bumped down to 5th just means she'll get more chances to battle than Ash, so she can surpass him in the next Frontier Championship, while Brandon calls the appointment wise on Scott's part, telling Ash that he has more than earned his place at the top. Luckily, even as the final brain, Ash is still given plenty of opportunities to battle, thanks to this influx of challenges, with each being of a high enough level to have fought their way up through the other 6 battle facilities. This keeps him from stagnating like he was at the start of his tenure, as his opponents often keep him on his toes, while allowing him to learn from them just as much as they do from him. On top of this, Ash has redoubled his training while not waiting for challenges, constantly aware of the fact that any day now, Scott may call on him to battle, and knowing that he might not get another shot at Ho-Oh, he can't afford to squander this one. Finally, the day arrives, with Scott calling all of the brains to Battle Frontier HQ, and while at first Ash does not recognize the cause of the summons, being more surprised by the fact they are meeting in person rather than over the phone like they usually do, when he arrives at the skyscraper in Celadon, all doubt is stripped from his mind as he sees the roof has been transformed into a massive arena. Heading up in the elevator with the other Kanto brains, Ash soon sees Scott standing in the center of the arena, though he is far from the only person here, as up in the stands, Ash sees all his family, friends, and even the odd rival like Richie and Morrison. Up the back, Ash catches sight of the Sinnoh brains, each surveying the battlefield with interest, and as his eyes pass over each of them, he spots Paul at the very back, Chimchar by his side, or rather, Monferno, who the young Junction Master is pleased to see looks much healthier than it did last time they met. At this moment, Scott demands Ash's attention once more, explaining this will be the site of their exhibition match, adding that if Ash is open to it, he'd like to make it a full battle. Grinning, Ash replies that he's fine with that, causing the Frontier boss to smile as he returns to one side of the field, while Ash moves to the other, activating his Poketch and transferring in the 5 Pokemon he thinks will best help him take down Scott. When they're in position, Jamero floats into view, projecting a scoreboard like the sort used in the various Pokemon League conferences, before telling the trans to bring out their first Pokemon, with Ash choosing Heracross like their first battle, and Scott unveiling a Pokemon Ash has never seen before. Still grinning, Scott explains this Pokemon is called Ferrothorn, and it's from the far-off Unova region, a place Ash is unfamiliar with, but which Scott claims may one day receive a battle frontier of its own. However, that is for another time. What matters now is their battle, with Scott taking the first move by calling for spikes. As he does so, Ash calls for a Focus Punch, which is able to charge unabated, as Ferrothorn shoots off a volley of barbs which bury themselves on Ash's side of the field. Once Focus Punch is ready, Heracross flies forward, striking Ferrothorn in what Ash can only assume is its chin, and causing it to shriek metallically at the super effective hit. However, to the boys' dismay, Heracross also lets out a pain noise at the moment of impact, revealing one of Ferrothorn's many spikes embedded in its hand, as Scott explains that Ferrothorn's ability is called Iron Barbs, meaning each time Heracross hits it, it'll be hurt as well. Nonetheless, Ash declares in that case they'll just have to take it out with one all-or-nothing finishing blow, calling for a super-powered Focus Punch. Chittering determinedly, the Battle Beetle begins readying its attack, while Scott capitalizes on this delay to lay down a second set of spikes. Finally, Heracross finishes preparing its Focus Punch, and so an Ash's Cry lunges forward, striking Ferrothorn with all its might and sending the Thorn Pod Pokemon soaring backwards. However, thanks to Iron Barbs, Ferrothorn is able to wrap one of its thorny feet into Heracross's carapace, damaging it and bringing it along for the ride. By now, Ferrothorn is looking much the worse for wear, with Ash believing one more hit should be more than enough to dispatch it, though it seems Scott has had much the same idea, with him deciding that if Ferrothorn must go down, it won't be going alone. To this end, he calls for an explosion, and with Heracross unable to extricate itself from its opponent, it is at ground zero of the explosion, taking it out with the Unovan Steel type and proving that Scott isn't messing around. Next up for Scott is Tyranitar, with the Frontier boss informing Ash that while Ferrothorn is a great pal, it's his weakest Pokemon, so from here on in, he'll be going all out. In response, Ash chooses Kingler, though to his horror, when the King Crab lands on the field, Ferrothorn's spikes activate, impaling the water type's feet, legs, and underbelly in a brutal testament not only to Scott's power, but to his forward planning. All the same, Ash tells his old friend not to let this get to it, calling for a Crab Hammer, while Scott has Tyranitar meet it with Stone Edge, this time manifested as a pair of rocky daggers which clash against Kingler's claws. This quickly becomes a slugfest, as the two Pokemon appear comparable in power, with Crabhammer and Stone Edge striking each other repeatedly, while occasionally one of them manages to get in a lucky hit that circumvents the opponent's counter and strikes them head on. Figuring the best thing he can do is support Kingler, Ash calls out his encouragement, with the stoic Crab drawing hard from this, as it continues to strike back against the pseudo-legendary Tyranitar. Fortunately, Kingler does have one advantage, a type advantage to be specific, with its water-type moves slowly eroding the rock daggers, until finally, when Crabhammer and Stone Edge clash one last time, the rocky blade shatters, leaving the armor Pokemon stunned, and allowing Kingler to get in a perfectly placed uppercut which sends Tyranitar into the air, before crashing down hard on its back, unconscious. Now technically at a numbers disadvantage, Scott's third Pokemon is his Garchomp, another new face to Ash, the one who quickly proves itself deserving of a place on Scott's team, as it fires off a Draco Meteor, which Kingler cannot avoid and just barely withstands, leaving it vulnerable to the follow-up Giga Impact, which drives the King Crab into the back wall, knocking it out. Recognizing Garchomp as a bruiser, Ash decides to fight bulk with bulk, bringing out Snorlax, whose ice punches quickly play havoc on the land shark, causing Scott to comment that he now knows how Greta must have felt during their match. Nonetheless, being a strategic battler, Scott recalls Garchomp after the second quad effective Ice Punch, swapping in Metagross, who was able to resist the Arctic Strike before retaliating with a Hammer Arm, which is almost as devastating to Snorlax as its hits were to Garchomp. However, instead of discouraging Ash and Snorlax, this only fuels their tenacious natures, with the young Junction Master calling for a Hyper Beam, which blasts Metagross, though to Ash's surprise, does less damage than he would have expected, with Scott commenting that his big brain bot resists normal type moves. In fact, if Ash hasn't taught Snorlax any new moves since their match at the Battle Arena, then Metagross resists everything Snorlax has in its repertoire. Unfortunately, this isn't the only problem Ash must now contend with, as thanks to the drawback of Hyper Beam, Snorlax has to recharge, allowing Metagross to get in a free Hammer Arm, much to the sleeping Pokemon's discomfort. As a matter of fact, this hit does so much damage that sleeping seems to be Snorlax's only option, with Ash calling for a rest to buy him some time to come up with a strategy. However, it seems that Ferrothorn's spikes aren't only useful as an entry hazard, as when Snorlax attempts to lie down on the barbed ground, it cannot get comfortable, preventing it from resting, and thus allowing Metagross to finish it off with another Hammer Arm, swinging things definitively in Scott's favor. Needing some serious firepower to deal with the Iron Leg Pokemon, Ash's next choice is Heatran, though here he receives receives a nasty shock, as when the Fire Steel type touches down, it bellows in pain. Casually, Scott informs Ash that Spikes is a ground type move, meaning Heatran and Pikachu are both especially susceptible to it, with Ash feeling a chill run down his spine as he realizes that Scott predicted at least 1/3 of his team before the battle began, and was able to plan for it. If that's the case, what other traps could he have laid? Thankfully, before Ash can plunge into self-doubt, Pikachu makes an encouraging noise on his shoulder, while on the field, Heatran similarly rumbles its faith in its trainer, clearly conveying that even with Scott's traps in play, the two of them are still willing to face it for Ash, and more than that they are confident they can adapt to any other surprises Scott may have for them and beat him with the power of their teamwork. Feeling bolstered by this, Ash calls for a Magma Storm, which is more than enough to blow Metagross away in one hit. This forces Scott to bring back in Garchomp, who readies an Earthquake in an attempt to do what Spikes couldn't, and felt the legendary Lava Dome Pokemon. However, recognizing how dangerous this could be, Ash recalls Heatran at the last moment, bringing in Sceptile as his penultimate Pokemon, with the Grass Gecko looking cool as it shrugs off the Spikes damage, then places a twig in its mouth, all the while eyeing up Garchomp as if it is unimpressed. Having taken the last move, Scott offers the next one to Ash, and not wanting to waste it, the boy orders Sceptile to start strong with Solar Beam, using the move they learned in their battle with Spencer to blast Garchomp. While this is not super effective due to Garchomp's Dragon typing, mitigating its ground typing's Grass weakness, this still does a fair amount of damage, causing the Mark Pokemon to bare its teeth at Sceptile, as Scott has it retaliate with a second Draco Meteor. Thanks to having already lost some attacking power from the first usage of this move, these comets are slightly smaller than the ones used against Kingler, with Ash having Sceptile leap into the air and use Leaf Blade to cut through several of them in an attempt to shield itself from harm. Unfortunately, this only half works, as while the impact is negated by this tactic, the destruction of the meteors simply causes them to explode, turning the attack from a meteor shower into a minefield, with Sceptile being battered by the explosions. Nonetheless, it is able to stay on its feet as it touches down, even managing to recover quick enough to dash in and drive a Leaf Blade into the top of Garchomp's head. This is met with a Dragon Claw from the Land Shark, which sends the forest Pokemon skidding back, though at least here Garchomp seems to have earned Sceptile's respect, with the feeling being mutual as the pair eye each other up. As one, Ash and Scott then call for a repeat of these moves, with the two Pokemon rushing in and clashing blade against claw, though it seems this is simply a feint, with Scott revealing his true plan to be a point-blank Draco Meteor, which Sceptile will not be able to mitigate due to having its Leaf Blade locked against Garchomp's Dragon Claw. However, Ash is not the adaptability brain for nothing, and so seeing a chance to turn this to his advantage, has Sceptile wait for the last second before telling it to use Pound on Garchomp's chin. Trusting Ash's plan, Sceptile drops the Leaf Blade, allowing the Dragon Ground type to rake its claws across its belly, before doing a speedy pirouette to slam its tree-like tail into Garchomp's chin. This naturally forces the Mark Pokemon's jaw to clamp shut, just as the Draco Meteor is about to be fired, and with nowhere else to go, the explosive force of this Dragon-type move turns inwards, dealing super effective damage to Garchomp and knocking it out in a stunning reversal. Now it is Scott's turn to unveil his penultimate Pokemon, with him bringing back the Dragonite from their first battle. Like last time, Dragonite opens with a Fire Blast, and between this being super effective, the damage from the last battle, and the fatigue of going toe-to-toe with Garchomp, this is too much for Sceptile, who was taken out in one fell swoop. Choosing to fight fire with fire, rather literally, Ash brings back out Heatran, an interesting choice, as while it will resist Dragonite's normal flying and dragon-type moves, the orange dragon is likewise resistant to its fire-type attacks, while being immune to its ground-type moves. Thankfully, Heatran does know one move that can deal super effective damage to Dragonite, with that being Stone Edge, as with a rumble the Lava Dome Pokemon manifests chunks of stone, which it hurls at Dragonite, striking it and causing it to howl in pain. However, Scott and Dragonite aren't about to just sit back and take this, with Dragonite responding by launching a Fire Blast back at the Magma Monster, who can do little more than endure the hit before firing back. This quickly becomes a war of attrition, with it being anyone's guess as to who will fall first, as while Heatran's moves are more damaging, Dragonite has the advantage of being at full health, while the Lava Dome Pokemon has been forced to withstand two set of quad-effective spikes upon entering the battlefield. Though in the end, there is a reason one of these Pokemon is regarded as legendary, while the other is only pseudo-legendary. And so when Dragonite finally runs out of Fire Blasts, Heatran is able to capitalize on this, bombarding its foe with rocks and burying it underneath an impromptu cairn, which stands as a memorial to its hopes of victory. Now Scott is down to his last Pokemon, though Ash doesn't have to guess what it is, with a sunglasses-clad man bringing forth his Ho-Oh, who trawls majestically as it rises into the air. Knowing Heatran won't be able to last much longer, Ash tells it to put everything it has into a Magma Storm, while Scott has Ho-Oh meet this with a Sacred Flame. A second later, liquid and plasmatic fire meet in mid-air, with the resultant steam being enough to turn the entire arena into a sauna. Though even in the haze, no one misses what happens next, as the radiant glow of Sacred Flame clearly breaks through the Magma Storm, bathing Heatran in celestial fire and taking it out of the fight. Recalling Heatran with his thanks, Ash then looks to Pikachu, asking if he's ready for this rematch, with the electric rodent flashing his cheeks in a way that makes it clear that just like his trainer, he knew it would come down to this in the end. Pouncing onto the battlefield, Pikachu is assailed by Frothorn's spikes just like his teammates, with him taking the super effective damage Scott had warned of, though even still he stays strong, readying himself as Ho-Oh prepares into the Sacred Flame. However, here Ash and Pikachu have a little surprise for the Frontier boss, as when Ash has his buddy fire off a Thunderbolt to counter the flames, it does what Heatran's Magma Storm couldn't, and counters it, causing both moves to dissipate in the air. Grinning broadly, Scott comments that Ash has really grown a lot since their last battle, though they'll have to see how Pikachu handles another Brave Bird. Matching his boss's grin, Ash tells Pikachu to use Volt Tackle, with the mouse coating himself in a golden aura as he shoots up into the air, just as Ho-Oh is coming down. As a result, the pair of Pokemon clash in midair, their respective auras growing as they try with all their might to force the other back. Unfortunately, neither can manage this feat, with both taking more and more damage, both from their continued contact with the other's attack, as well as recoil from their own, until finally when the air pressure between them grows too great, they are pushed away from each other, rendering this clash a stalemate, just like the last one. However, Ash would not be the frontier brain that he is if he could not adapt to this situation, and so wanting to make use of Pikachu and Ho-Oh's close proximity, he orders an Iron Tail, which his starter is happy to carry out, dropping his electric cloak in favor of a glowing sheen for his tail. Alas, now it is Ash and Pikachu's turn to be surprised, as Scott reveals that he and Ho-Oh have actually been working on a new move, inspired by how much damage Iron Tail did to them in their last bout, telling his almighty Phoenix to meet Iron Tail with Iron Head. At once, Ho-Oh's head crest takes on a steely shine, similar to Pikachu's tail, with the two metallic appendages clashing a moment later as the sound of steel on steel rings out. Briefly, it appears as though this will prove to be a stalemate, just like all the other exchanges, though there is one key difference here, with that being that Pikachu is far more experienced with Iron Tail than Ho-Oh is with Iron Head. This becomes obvious as the electric rodent is able to position himself in a way that applies additional pressure to the Firebird's head and neck, forcing it to relent and allowing Pikachu to strike it in the back of the neck. This only compounds Scott's shock at how much Ash and Pikachu have grown, with him having Ho-Oh perform an aerial turn so it can blast the rat with Sacred Flame at point-blank range, hoping this will be enough to finish him off. Though, as if sharing a mind, Pikachu immediately goes into Volt Tackle before Ash can even get all the words out, with his protective coating allowing him to propel himself into the flames and come out the other side unharmed, striking Ho-Oh between the eyes and causing it to squawk indignantly as the little yellow bottle lands atop its beak. Seeing victory right before them, Ash turns his cap backwards, then in a voice brimming with confidence and excitement, calls for a Thunderbolt, which Pikachu happily obeys, briefly giving Ho-Oh the same golden hue it had the day they first met, though for very different reasons. However, this is not where the onslaught ends, as with Pikachu going all out, the electrical discharge quickly grows until it becomes an all-consuming aura which briefly blinds everyone as their whole world is transformed into a wall of shining yellow. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it fades, leaving just Pikachu and Ho-Oh, both of whom are falling out of the sky. With an earth-shattering crash, the rainbow Pokemon then strikes the battlefield, plowing a mighty trench as it comes to a stop at Ash's feet, clearly unconscious, while atop it stands a battle-worn but unmistakably ecstatic Pikachu. Letting out a cry, Trainer and Pokemon then run to each other, with Pikachu leaping into Ash's arms as the boy spins him around before wrapping him in a hug and calling him the best. From a small distance away, Scott grins that he believes that title belongs to both of them, as there is no doubt they have surpassed him and Ho-Oh. The Frontier boss then makes his way to Ash to shake his hand, though not before he gratefully pats Ho-Oh's head and returns it to its ball with his sincerest thanks. When the two trainers meet, they both wear matching smiles, with Scott once again congratulating Ash on his victory and claiming that not only is he the strongest brain, but the strongest trainer he's ever met in all his travels, and perhaps even the strongest in the world. Rubbing the back of his head modestly, Ash grins that he's not sure about that, since it was really his Pokemon who did all the hard work, as on his shoulder, Pikachu cheers proudly, earning him a laugh from his trainer, who fondly pats his head. This display of affection makes Scott smile, and as the spectators begin cheering their praises for the young Junction Master, Scott asks Ash what he plans to do next. For a moment, Ash thinks deeply, then as a smile reforms on his face, he laughs that he'll probably just keep doing what he's been doing, taking on challenges at the Battle Junction, and keeping up his training so he never stops improving. Laughing now too, Scott replies that it's this mindset that makes him the best. Then, as the pair shake hands at last, it is as equals. And that's where we'll end the story of what if Ash became a Frontier Brain. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And I will see you as the journey continues.